Hello, my name is Paul Anthony Taylor. I'm the Executive Director of the Dr. Arth Health Foundation and I'm a British citizen. In the upcoming referendum my country will be holding on its membership of the European Union, or Brussels EU, I will be voting for Brexit. I want my country to leave the Brussels EU, and in this video I'll be telling you why. Firstly, I am deeply concerned that my country has fallen under the grip of an unelected dictatorship. You see, the real power in Europe today lies with the European Commission, its executive body. While the European Commission is the primary lawmaking body of Europe, none of its 28 officials are elected by the people of Europe. They are all simply appointed to their roles. And this, as I will explain, is how it was always intended. While I was too young to vote in it, Britain previously had a referendum on its membership of the Brussels EU in 1975. My late father voted in that referendum, and based on what he was told by Britain's politicians and the British media at that time, he voted to remain in the Brussels EU. To his dying day, however, he insisted that what the Brussels EU eventually became was not what he was told he was voting for. If ever he had the opportunity to vote again on Britain's membership, he told me, he would vote to leave. You know, one of the curious things about the Brussels EU is that in promoting itself to the world, it continually tries to rewrite or even erase some of the most important facts about its history. While there are many examples of this, nowhere is it perhaps more apparent than in the image it tries to present of Walter Hallstein, the man who was the first president of the European Commission. Hallstein held this post between 1958 and 1967 and is described on the Brussels EU website as a visionary leader and a diplomatic force who propelled European integration. Well, in this video, I'm going to tell you some of the biographical facts that the Brussels EU forgot to mention about Hallstein. In doing so, my hope is that we will perhaps then be able to better identify the true interests and the motives that lie behind the Brussels EU. It is my firm belief that a Europe of the people, for the people and by the people is possible, but only if it is built on transparency and our political leaders finally facing up to the historical truth about Europe's past. One of the hidden facts about Hallstein, completely ignored by the Brussels EU, is that before and during World War II, he was a member of official Nazi organisations. The Association of National Socialist German Lawyers was founded in 1933, immediately after the Nazis had seized power. In 1936, it was converted into the notorious Nazi Association of Law Protectors. Membership of this second organisation was restricted to those individuals showing uncompromising support for and participation in the implementation of Nazi ideology. Walter Hallstein was a member of both these organisations. How do we know this? Well, here's a copy of a memorandum sent by Hallstein to the representative of the Nazi government at the University of Rostock in Germany in 1935, in which he admits his membership of these organisations. But Hallstein's role in these organisations was not simply a passive one. To the contrary, in fact, he played key roles representing the Nazi government during state negotiations. In May 1938, for example, 1 year before the outbreak of World War II, Adolf Hitler paid an official state visit to Italy to meet with Mussolini and initiate the planning for a future Europe under their control. This official Nazi state visit marked the beginning of some of the key preparations for World War II, including the implementation of dictatorial laws across Europe. To this effect, a binational commission was established, including members from both Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy, with the primary goal of creating the legal basis for a European dictatorship. Only a few weeks later, the first meeting of this commission's lawyers took place in Rome. One of the legal experts representing Nazi Germany at these official negotiations was none other than Walter Hallstein. But the thing that arguably tells us the most about Hallstein and his ideology is a truly astonishing speech he gave shortly before the outbreak of World War II. He gave this speech in Rostock, Germany, in this building, which is still a landmark in the city today. A key aspect of the speech concerned what Hallstein referred to as the link-up of Austria with Germany and with large parts of what used to be known as Czechoslovakia. Hallstein described the seizing of these countries as being part of the creation of the Greater German Reich and the legal Germanization of the new territories. In other words, he was using legal language to argue that Germany had a legal right to take these countries and make them a part of what he called Greater Germany. Hallstein also specifically stated that the failure to create a unified legal system for this Greater Germany was one of the unfinished tasks and failures of the Second German Reich. The Second German Reich, of course, covered the period through the final decades of the 19th century up to the end of World War I. So what Hallstein meant here was that he regretted the outcome of World War I and still supported its goals. Interestingly, Hallstein described the legal process for the creation of this unified legal system as being the issuing of directives. Notably, when he eventually became president of the European Commission, essentially this same approach, the issuing of directives, was chosen for the system of lawmaking, and it is still in use today. Hallstein also described the creation of this Greater German Reich as being an economic event of sheer unimaginable consequences. So to Hallstein, far from being about the invading and seizing of other countries, the creation of this Greater German Reich was simply a legal and economic matter. But perhaps the most shocking thing of all about this speech is that Hallstein stated that one of the most important laws to be introduced in the annexed countries was the law for the protection of the German blood and the German honour. In other words, he advocated the imposition of the Nuremberg racial laws as a top priority in Greater Germany. The Nuremberg racial laws, of course, excluded German Jews from Reich citizenship and prohibited them from marrying or even having sexual relations with persons of German or related blood. You see, this was the ideology of the man who was the chief architect of the Brussels EU and who went on to become its first president. You might be wondering how we know Hallstein said these things. Well, for one thing, we have a copy of his original handwritten manuscript for the speech. We also have a copy of a newspaper report about the speech that was published the following day after he had given it. This report confirms the venue of the speech, the date of the speech, and it describes how the attendees included the entire elite of the Nazi state in the Rostock region. We also have a copy of the official invitation to the event. It too confirms the title of the speech and the date of the speech. So we have multiple pieces of evidence that Hallstein gave this speech and said these things. So we have to ask ourselves, how did a man like this come to sign the Treaties of Rome? The Treaties of Rome were signed in 1957. They were the documents that gave birth to the Brussels EU we know today. How could a man with this ideology come to be sitting there with his pen poised, ready to change the future of Europe with his signature? This could surely only happen if there were people and corporate interests who wanted it to be like this. It is simply unthinkable that Hallstein could possibly be sitting there, only 12 years after the end of World War II, having participated in Nazi organisations and having this ideology, but with nobody else present being aware of it. In case you think Hallstein's dictatorial mindset must surely have changed after the end of World War II, think again. In his book, Europe in the Making, published in 1972, he proved definitively that his vision for a European dictatorship hadn't changed. He wrote that the European Commission is entrusted with what virtually amounts to a monopoly in taking the initiative in all matters affecting Europe. There are few exceptions to this rule, he said, but they ought to be removed at the earliest opportunity. As Hallstein saw it, the unelected European Commission should eventually be empowered to take all measures necessary for the implementation of Europe's laws, without having to rely on approval by even the Council of Ministers, the European body in which national government ministers meet. For the people of Great Britain, all this raises some profound questions, particularly regarding Hallstein's relationship with former British Prime Minister Edward Heath. After French President Charles de Gaulle had vetoed Britain's entry into the Brussels EU during the 1960s, Heath invited Hallstein to Chequers, his prime ministerial country residence, to examine why the entry had failed. This visit was one of several that Hallstein made to Chequers during Heath's time as Prime Minister. Behind the scenes, during the decade leading up to Britain joining the Brussels EU in 1973, Hallstein and Heath met on numerous occasions and worked extremely closely together. Hallstein and Heath were determined for Britain to join the Brussels EU and stay in it, regardless of any opposition from the British people. In his foreword to our book on the Brussels EU, August Kowalczyk, a former prisoner at Auschwitz, described how it is only through sharing the truth that we can reach a greater social openness and begin the process of building a better Europe that is truly designed in the interests of its people. However difficult this might sometimes seem, however hard the historical facts are to face, the truth is and always will be our best route towards freedom, democracy, a better Europe and a better world. I am firmly convinced that if the British people make the right decision on the 23rd of June, the first steps towards creating a better Europe and a better world will have been taken.